Welcome to Resilience Development in Action, where strength meets strategy and courage to help you move forward. Each week, your host, Steve Bisson, a therapist with over 2 decades of experience in the first responder community, brings you powerful conversations about resilience, growth, and healing through trauma and grief. Through authentic interviews, expert discussions, and real-world experiences, we dive deep into the heart of human resilience. We explore crucial topics like trauma recovery, grief processing, stress management, and emotional well-being. This is Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson.
GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember, because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code STEVE50 in the promo code area, STEVE50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 220. If you haven't listened to episode 219, it was the second part with Hannah Elmore. Great interview. Go back and listen to it. We talked about a lot of stuff, IAFF stuff also. But episode 220 will be with Bill Dwinnells. Bill Dwinnells is a friend. He's also a business partner. We're working on a few things together. Bill has been in crisis work for over 25 years. I think he's probably more in like the 30-year mark. Bill is also someone who is a licensed mental health counselor, been practicing for over 30 years. He was also an EMT on the ambulance, and we really are excited about our project with Gambit Counseling. So here's the interview. Bill Dwinnells, welcome back to Resilience Development in Action.
Thanks, Steve. Once again, an absolute pleasure and honor to be here.
Well, I do hope that you say that by the end of the episode.
Yes, I'm here without any kind of intermediary.
But no, I think that one of the things, like, people can go listen back to those episodes that I mentioned, but maybe it'd be good for you to reintroduce yourself, just so people who don't want to go listen to those episodes, because sometimes it can be hard to do that, to just say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Bill Dwinnells. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, both in Massachusetts and now Vermont. I've spent about 27 years working in emergency psychiatric services. So I've worked alongside a lot of police and fire EMS departments, providing psychiatric consultation on scene. I was actually one of, if not, I think the first co-responder for police departments in the state, since those programs have been up and running. I've helped form multiple co-responding programs and CIT programs, the crisis intervention teams for police departments. Over the years, I think I'm up to about 6 or 7 departments at this point.
Wow.
And I also have my own private practice that, specializes in helping people with depression, anxiety, and building, much like the topic of your show today, building resilience. In addition to that, I have worked in what now seems like a previous life, about 10 years as an EMT, both for private and municipal departments, as well as a number of years on about 3 different volunteer on call fire departments.
And all regionally, right? Right around here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, all within Massachusetts.
And for the record, anyone who knows me knows I respect that. But if you ever want to hear a good bad or good or bad thing I said about Bill when we first introduced ourselves to a chief. Please don't tell anyone, Bill. They'll force them to kind of like write to me. Wasn't bad, but it was definitely not professional, and that's on me. Um, leave a little bit of no mystery here, please. And for the record, we were all together for my birthday a few weeks ago, and my girlfriend gave me probably as much shit as he did. So works out in some ways. But one of the things that we've been doing, Bill, we talk about, resilience development in action. I think when you were on, it was finding your way through therapy.
Right.
And we were talking generally mental health, but now this has become a lot more about resilience development in action, helping first responders in particular. And me and you started, I've talked about it here and there, but me and Bill started about 3 years ago, a company that is finally finding its footing called Gambit Counseling. You want to talk a little bit about that formation, how we got together and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, we got together and we had enjoyed working together so much. I mean, we've worked a couple of different jobs together at this point and thought we really had a very unique way of providing therapy for people. I believe both of us have had clients make comments like, hey, you're not a typical therapist. And to be quite honest, we pride ourselves on not being a typical therapist. We certainly want to create a safe space and build rapport like any therapist does, but we really want to be real with people as well. We want them to come away from the sessions feeling like they got something, not a therapist who just answered questions with questions, but actually gave them some practical skills to use or develop that can help them really manage their own life. I don't believe either one of us ever tells people what to do specifically, or not typically. Occasionally, maybe we do if they need
Right.
that kind of direction. But for the most part, we really prided ourselves on helping people learn to manage their own lives, their own emotions, and really use their logic to kind of figure their way through difficulties.
Right. And I think that what happens too is that, Bill talked about a little bit of his experience working with, when we first started the company, we were really aiming to not only do that type of stuff, but also kind of like form other people. And, Bill has completed his MBA, and we were trying to get people to come in and kind of like we could educate them, help them develop either through our group practice at the time or help them develop skills so they can go on their own. But that's more often than I can count to the model we're kind of like aiming for at this point, right?
Yeah, I think we actually, like what they tell you in all these marketing classes is to really define your niche, and I think, our first go out the door, we were trying to be a little too many things for too many people, and after discussing with Steve, like, look, what really makes us feel good about doing our jobs. And, we realize that our passion is really helping first responders. And, we started to focus a little bit more, which gradually became more and more focusing on the first responder community and, some of the unique challenges that members of that community face. And how can we best support them, when something happens and maybe even support them before something happens, helping them give them the education so that maybe we can stave off some of these things.
Right. And I think that it goes also, you talked about style. First responder, the unique challenges that they face is one thing. It's how you deliver the message as a therapist that's also key. And I think that that's what we bring to the table. It's pretty unique. And that's what we're trying to kind of like convey. If I had to ask you to describe not only about, how do you communicate with a first responder, how has your experience been in the therapeutic setting, not in the field where we got to be direct, honest, and get shit done, but rather in a therapeutic setting, how would you describe the style that we have to develop?
Well, I would say it is still mostly fairly direct, direct and offering different perspectives, because sometimes I think, folks, maybe especially first responders, they have protocols in their head. This is what I do in this situation. And for some of the challenges that they come across, there's no protocol for it. and they can get very myopic on, well, this is what I see other people do, not realizing that that may just be a facade that the other person's putting on. That's not really an effective way to handle whatever the challenge is. So I think we are still direct, but we're direct in a way that offer different perspectives and like, well, have you considered that, this may be playing into it, and doing it in a way that shows that having emotions is normal. It's not weak. Like I know we use a lot of like Buddhist and Stoic concepts in what we do, not trying to push either religion or philosophy, but some of these concepts form the basis of a lot of the types of therapy we practice. And helping people, especially first responders, clear up that we don't have to go into these jobs and be these emotionless robots who feel like they can't be affected by, whatever it is we happen to come on scene to, but realizing that these things, these feelings are going to come up, and there are effective ways to manage them. Because I've had people come into session and say, like, well, can you get rid of my anxiety? Can you get rid of my trauma? No.
Oh, you're hiding the magic wand? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm hiding the magic wand. I don't, you got to pay extra for that. Uh, no, but, just reminding people like, with your trauma, we can't change that the trauma happened. We can't change that you get anxious. If we were able to get rid of your emotions, you wouldn't be human anymore. And then honestly, what good of a therapist would we be? The whole point is we're here to help you manage the human experience. Well, first responders have a very unique perspective on the human experience. So they need therapists who can really understand that perspective and give them very good practical skills for how to manage those experiences.
I think we all have stories, right? And for what we've seen in our sessions. And
Yeah.
one of the common themes that I get from a lot of the first responders is I went to another therapist, and when I told them some of the stories or some of the stuff I've been through, you can literally see them that the therapist needs a few seconds before they can react to it. That's one of the ones I always remember is that someone started crying in front of me, and one of them said, I got to take a couple of minutes. And I mean, those are not uncommon stories because first responders are, again, you've heard me say this on the podcast. Bill has heard me say it, but I like to repeat it. First responders see the 5% that the 95% of the population does not know about or doesn't want to recognize. And so you got to be ready for that stuff. And for me, it's really about being able to take on that baggage, not make it about you, and not take on the emotional strain for yourself and be there for the client, which is not like, yeah, I made it sound like it's fucking like anyone can fucking do it, but apparently not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I can remember when I was on a department, we had an annual dinner with all the families and stuff come in, and they did a slideshow, and the slideshow was pictures of scenes from the last year. It was just one year, the current year, and all the families were like, "That all happened, like in our town?" Like, yeah, yeah. It's really amazing. Like you said, first responders see a very unique slice of American life that the vast majority of people know absolutely nothing about. And to be honest, they're not supposed to, to a certain degree, because that's where
Well,
we go and we take care of it.
I think that's why, first responders do exist so that you don't know about the bad person, the crappy person, or whatever.
Yeah.
We took care of it. Maybe you'll read it in the police blog or channel 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 12, whatever. But I think that's part of it. Do you know how, like we all deal with it differently. But for me, when I'll go back to a funny story about a meeting we had a couple of weeks ago where me and Bill are not Mr. Clipboard when we talk to people. But have you been? Do you have any like I talked about the trauma and how some therapists who are not trained in being, they're not culturally competent, they struggle with. You have other mentions that you can think about that first responders face that typically the population doesn't know about, or in therapy, a therapist would be like, really, that's a problem, stuff like that. Because I think that one of the things that, like I talked about having previous guests in the last two episodes about couples and facing like getting
Yeah.
home and, you know, I, you just maybe had a bad day or whatever. You don't want to be sitting there talking about your feelings, or you don't want to be handed off the kids right away or what have you. And I think sometimes it's understanding that dynamic outside of work that I think people don't comprehend that the first responders face.
Yeah, I think making that transition coming off shift and we used to call it transitioning to regular life, can be very difficult depending if you had a rough shift and had some bad scenes with negative outcomes. Especially if you're coming back to a partner who's, you know, kind of already told you that that stuff kind of freaks them out and they don't really want to hear about it. Not that they don't want to be supportive, just like you said before, the therapists get freaked out. Sometimes our loved ones, they really don't want to know what it is we did at work today because that would scare them. And the first responder has to, find a way to, how do I make that adjustment? I think one of the biggest things is the disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of disconnect. I've heard a lot of first responders say that they just feel different, and some of I with the popularity of Harry Potter, I heard some first responders calling non-first responders the muggles. They're like the average normal people. They don't understand us.
Right.
And in a very real sense, that's very true. The world the first responder lives in is very different than the regular world, so to speak. And I think sometimes that leads to a feeling of disconnection, that I can't really be fully myself because possibly fully myself might scare or unnerve the people around me if I told them, what it is I do or what it is I did today. So I think, I've seen first responders who are very active in the coaching softball and and stuff like that, and yet still, they seem like they're like this really gregarious person, but yet in therapy they'll make comments that they just feel completely disconnected from everybody, you
But I
know?
think they are disconnected because, like I always go back to one of the first episodes I did with my buddy Jay. When you go to a barbecue, oh, you're a cop. Tell me your worst story. Or, oh, you're a paramedic. Tell me what your
Yeah.
worst story is. Why would I want to talk about that at a picnic?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
People always want to hear the blood and gut stories or the high intensity stories. But it's interesting because as much as they want to hear those stories, they never actually want to hear how that affected you.
and they don't want to hear the story sometimes once they hear it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they regret the stories if you do tell them the story.
Right. So I think that, part of what, I think that we came to with our Gambit counseling is that we really realize that there's great peer support networks. That absolutely is in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
across the state, across the country. But one of the things that, and there's great CISM teams, and shout out to former guest and soon to be a guest again, Aaron, who's going to be talking about some of that too. But
Yep.
one of the things that's missing is that they don't have preventive work. Like a lot of the stuff is reactionary as a police officer and as like you're working on an ambulance, working at a hospital, working in the military. It's a reactive type of situation. And one of the things that I know me and you really found very important once, I went to a training, I think, or whatever, and I said, "Hey, Bill, what about wellness and doing preventative visits?" And that's part of our newer model that we're working on. You want to talk more about how you perceive the wellness being so important for those guys?
Yeah. You know, when we were talking about it, going towards it as far as like, or attacking the problem as far as wellness goes, you know, it seems so obvious that, part of me couldn't believe we hadn't thought about it before, but, instead of just reacting to what the challenge is, what if we did something and started to address the problems upstream? If we were offering, not only therapy for when something happens, but if we started offering education courses, training courses that would, sort of, prep people for these are the things that you might experience, and here are some practical skills for how to manage them, as well as, maybe coming in and doing checkups, not necessarily therapy, but somebody who they can sit and talk to who, kind of understands the forces at play here and can just kind of point out and say, hey, maybe you could use some assistance with this, that, or the other thing, depending upon what the situation is. Or maybe this might help you, connect more with your spouse, but the preventative things, kind of getting at the problem upstream before it becomes a problem. Maybe we can head some of these things off. I kind of liken it to in the fire service, the fire prevention team. Let's prevent the fire from happening in the first place, with some just basic routine checks and, routine checks and things that we monitor. So I think that's part of it.
And I think that what you're talking about too is, and I want to be clear for those who are listening and maybe on a peer support team or a CISM. Me and Bill are not trying to talk about taking that away. In fact, we consider it very complementary to the work that we're going to do. I think that's important to note. But yes, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, love the CISM teams, the debriefings, and the kind of the crisis response, because sometimes things happen, they're very overwhelming, and those teams are great. Having been on, both of us have worked similar type jobs, they're fantastic. At the same time, by helping, maybe with some training classes that we've been throwing around, we can make the folks more resilient so that those CISMs can be even more effective, should they have to happen, for large events, because a lot of these CISM teams come in for, big dramatic events. But we also want to keep in mind that sometimes trauma, or what's usually more commonly called compassion fatigue, is kind of like death by a thousand paper cuts.
Right.
It's never any one thing. It's more the accumulation of things you've gone to over, some folks we've worked with have a 20, 30, 40-year career. They might have some stuff they want to talk about, and we want to make sure that we're able to give them the skills and techniques so that they can have that 30, 40-year career, if that's what they so choose.
Yeah, and I think that that's, and one of the things that I want to acknowledge, while I said CISMs are important, peer support is important, but none of those are one size fit all. And again, they can't fit everyone. And I know that what we talk about, these wellness visits and these trainings and these things, we also realize that that's not a one size fits all. It's like not for everyone, and we also recognize that. And one of the things that I know, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but love to hear your point of view. One of the things that people in the first responder world really don't like is go see this guy to talk. Yeah, that doesn't fly really fucking high with the guys I know anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point. It seems like one of the buzzwords, everything these days is on a spectrum, which in some ways kind of annoys me. I don't like that phrasing. And it's true. Everything is on a spectrum.
Right.
Some people may need this response to whatever it is that's going on. Some people may need a completely different response. And, most people are somewhere in the middle. And I think that's the gap, or that's how I see it, is that's the gap that we're trying to close. The CISMs, the peer specialists, the, individual therapists, all of that is great. And different people may need those things or may need all of them at different times. We just kind of see this as one more tool in the toolbox that can be used, again, to support the people who protect us every day.
Yeah. And I think that that's where, part of what I see is like sometimes, what I've heard about CISMs, they're very helpful. Please understand there is no knock on it. But I also have heard people like, I don't want to talk in front of my colleagues. I don't want
Right.
to tell them what's going on. And so that CISM unfortunately doesn't work for that particular type of worker.
Right.
And for them to go, well, go to therapy. is also kind of like, no, I'm not doing anything against my will. And I think that the gap that you're talking about is the wellness visit and also being able to talk about a support line. And I think that that's where, like the advantage that me and Bill, I think our program is going to be is that you know, I'm not, we're not working with, let's choose a Ashburnham PD just because we don't work with them for now. And I'm not picking on Ashburnham. They're in Massachusetts, but they can be like, I don't want to talk to my peer there. This isn't team. I didn't feel comfortable talking in front of people, but I am more than happy to call a support line where I know, Bill and Steve are not affiliated per se to us, and we can have a quick conversation as needed. And if I want to engage, I know Steve and Bill, they've trained us for some in-service and they're aware of the wellness program. It just fills a lot of the gaps that exists in the program, like in a lot of the need in the first responder world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, one of the things that you were, getting at, was trust. A number of the departments that we've both worked with, both as a department or individual members of those departments, that's like the big thing in the first responder world. I've worked with first responders who are like, oh, well, do you like your partner? No, I don't like him. I trust him. He'll do what he needs to do and he'll protect me. Um, we see this with a lot of military people. Oh, these are the worst people in the world. And I would absolutely trust them with my lives.
Right.
Not my wife, but my life. Uh, so it's very unique, especially when when we have, some of these first responders, military, contacting us saying like, well, they're very heartwarming. It's like, well, we want to work with you, because we know you, we trust you. I had that experience recently where the department I hadn't worked with in 10 years called me up and they said, hey, can we bend your ear about this? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And they're like, yeah, when we decided we wanted outside opinion on this, we all thought of you. And we were like, we know Bill, we trust Bill. Let's see if Bill will answer our question. Of course I will, to the best of my ability. So I think that's the other thing that we're trying to do in our program is to build the trust. We're not actually affiliated with any specific department or anything else. We're completely independent. So, you know, we can have very free, frank conversations about stuff and, it all remains confidential.
Because I think the other part too, and part of the conversations we can have through wellness visits or even like the support line. And let me be clear, when we talk about a support line, we're not there to just let people fucking vent. That's not the job we're looking at. That's why you have friends. That's why you have other
Right.
people in your life. We're not the venting, but like if you've had a major administration betrayal, you may not want to talk to anyone at the department because you don't know who your ally or who isn't and all that stuff. And call me paranoid, call me whatever you want. But the truth is that those things happen. And at the end of the day, having a support line, having a wellness visit, I didn't feel supported by my lieutenant. Well, me and Bill, we're not going to go see the lieutenant and go, da, 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 or talk to their colleagues. And you know what Johnny said about blah, blah. No, we don't give a shit. We're just there for them and giving them the coping skills in order to deal with that. Again, not always therapy, but sometimes being able to do the wellness visits just develops a lot of coping skills and resiliency. Yes, let's plug the podcast a little bit and develop that resiliency.
Yeah. I almost like to think of it as resilience coaching.
Yes,
Because we
100%.
we can take that as one of the next buzzwords that we'll use in society today. Resilience coaching. We'll help you focus on the problem and problem solve, what is the best way for you to move forward with whatever this challenge is. And for different people, it's going to be different things because people have different resources available to them, both externally and internally. How can we capitalize on what you have available, to hopefully rectify whatever the situation is?
And I think that that's the encompassing program that we're creating through Gambit and what we call Fortress right now, and is really about getting that wellness, that support, that resiliency, and the development of it. Because I don't know about you, but I develop resiliency every day. Sometimes against my will, sometimes because I have to, and sometimes because I want to.
It's definitely resilience. Developing resiliency is not a class you take and then you're good. It is like most other things, it's a daily practice. You know, some days you're really good at it, some days maybe not so much. That's
Right.
okay. Tomorrow's a new day. We get a whole nother day to practice. And it is. It's a practice. It's not a one and done skill. And I think that's the thing that people need to remember because we're in a very, especially the United States, especially today, we seem to have a society very focused on instant gratification. It's like, well, I took the class. Why come I can't do these things perfectly? No, that's not the way it works. We have to practice these things, each and every day to get really good at it.
Well, I think it's the joke that I make about my degree. When people ask me about, what's my experience? Oh, I read a book once. Pretty much have it covered after I read that book. And they all laugh. But I think that that's the attitude sometimes of like, oh, I went to one meeting about mental health resilience. I'm just making it up here. And
Yeah.
they go like, oh, I got it all and I know how to handle it. Well, it's dynamic. It doesn't, it changes with time. And as we both know, it's, what stays in here usually is either negative and repetitive or both. And learning to talk to someone like us who, again, never will I pretend I was a first responder. And people know this listening to this podcast. And you know me, Bill, I've never
Yeah.
pretended I was. But I think that having someone who has that experience, I've been there next to XYZ, and I don't want to use an example, but
Mhm.
whatever. And you've been there, you've been on calls, you are an EMT, you've done that stuff. And I think that having that experience and the mental health part is really what we bring to the game that is so much stronger than for people to understand us. Not that people won't try to see if we can handle their shit, but that's just par for the course.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it goes to like what you were saying earlier about like people take a course and they think they got it. I mean, between the two of us, we've run into a number of therapists who very well meaning, I don't want to, say anything negative about them, but they took a course on first responder culture and think they understand it, you know. And again, I'm not trying to shit on them or anything, but there's a very big difference between taking what is essentially a cultural competency class versus, really working with the individuals or having worked in those scenarios yourself. It's a very very different reading about it versus, oh no, I can very clearly picture the scene that, you say you walked into when you just say, oh, I was at an MVA.
Right.
Um, it's very different.
And I think that that's what it is. It's well-meaning people who,
Yeah.
and again, I'm going to shit on them. So if you don't, I will. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. But truthfully, one of the biggest pet peeves I have is, a lot of therapists who are not informed how to work with first responders. What's the first word they tell you? Oh, it's all trauma. Eh,
Yeah.
no, actually, no, not even. It's not even 50%. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Does it happen? Of course. But do you talk about trauma only with your first responders? I find that it's less than 50% of the time.
Yeah, no, not unless something really major happened.
Right.
Um, there may be things that are contributing to, chronic stress or yeah, I guess chronic stress would be the best way to put it, that may come up. We usually end up spending a lot of time, talking about stuff like that.
Right. And I think that what happens to me is you'll get someone who goes, oh, I went to this call and it reminded me of this call. And I'm
Yeah.
keeping it vague purposefully. And that means,
Yeah.
oh, I all I could see is that boy, girl, child, adult, whatever's face,
Right.
and then never mind again, sorry for putting therapy in here for all you first responders, but the transference stuff that we have, we go to a call that reminds us of a family member or our spouses or what have you. And that plays a factor too. It's not trauma necessarily, but it is sometimes what triggers a longer conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people show up to scenes where, you know, the person gets on scene and the victim is a child, their child's age,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody that reminds them of a loved one, or as you said, it reminded me of this other thing that happened, and it's you know, it can be challenging, especially when we have to, what do they call it in EMDR, the memory networks.
Yeah.
You know, we start uncovering,
Channels.
yeah, the channels, how all these things are connected. You know, I think that's important for people to know that sometimes, like, why is this coming out? Well, something you're experiencing is giving you the same feeling, so your mind thinks it's the same thing, and it starts to equate it really fast because your mind really likes shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think somebody said the brain makes 34,000 decisions a day. And
So,
the only way it can do that is it comes up with its own shortcuts. So
right.
sometimes it makes connections that if we really sat and thought logically about it, or a little less passionately, we probably wouldn't make those associations. But your brain needs to make them fast. So these are the connections it makes. It fills in the gaps. One of the things I always explain to my clients is this is why optical illusions work on us, because our mind is filling in what it thinks is supposed to be there.
Right. That's why sometimes we have false memory. And number
Right,
two, as I point out once in a while, there's no such thing as objective.
right. Our
But
our
maybe that's too much of our
world.
stoic philosophy. Who knows?
Yeah, could be. Yeah. The whole what was the phrase I told you the other day? Life is opinion. Life is just an opinion.
Correct.
So it's kind of interesting.
Well, I think that, talking about this fortress stuff between, the wellness visits, the trainings, and the support line, we we made sure that we named it properly. And if you want to know why, call us and we'll know that. But one of the things that I'm hoping is that different departments hear what we're talking about here and may be interested in like getting are more interested. They want to know more about what we do. How do you think? How, like, I know that you can contact us, but what's the best way to contact us, Bill? I mean, I think about my email,
Yep.
and my phone number, and what I mean, I can put in the show notes your email and your phone number.
Yeah, probably the email and the phone number. We also have our website, Gambit Counseling, that has the connections. It is going to be going through a bit of a redo since we're kind of rebranding ourselves. So, but you can definitely get both of us through our website, gambitcounseling.com. And you said you're going to put in the show notes our email addresses and phone numbers, if anyone's interested, because I know we also have our own individual websites too. And so I don't know, do we want to plug those?
It's up to you,
Uh,
Bill. It's your time.
sure. So we have, my personal website is just my last name, Dwinnells, spelled Dwinnells, BH. That's boy and Henry .com. That is for my personal private practice. And Steve, yours, I believe, is straight to the point therapy, right?
No,
Dot
it's
com.
actually steve-bisson.com.
Oh,
And I
com.
was hoping that you would actually said Dwinell's Bravo Hotel, but you didn't say that, so I'm a little
No,
disappointed.
I forgot my. That would be better.
But no, I really encourage any one of us, like, they go to our website, you'll have an idea. But also, if you want more details, because we're giving you a 30
Yeah.
to 40-minute presentation of it, we'd like to have a conversation with you because we really feel like this is going to fill a lot of the gaps that exist. And I think that Bill and I are very experienced. We have at least one other person that's available who is also going to be working with us and is a female. So it's not just men talking, there's women too. So there's a lot of advantages to have us around. So I just want to make sure that people can also think about all that, plus look at information that we created. Well, Bill, I think I'm going to see you Sunday.
Yep. Our usual
Uh,
spot.
and if you want to know where to find us, and you can always stop by. Again, we'll direct message me or Bill. You'll have his email and everything else. You can always join us on Sundays. And I really thank you for your time, Bill. Talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Well, this completes episode 220. Bill Dwinnells, you know you're my friend, but I still say thank you. Hope people inquire about our program. Go see Bill's website if you want to talk to Bill and do therapy with him. But I really want to thank him, and I will see you for episode 221.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.